On the Water TV is brought to you by Evinrude, makers of the innovative line of E-Tech outboards and the official outboard of On the Water TV.
Hi, I'm Andy Nabreski. Welcome to On the Water TV. Right now, it's the end of July and the summer temperatures are at their peak. A lot of the fishing is slowing down around us right now, but today we're going to use the heat to our advantage. When the water temperatures soar and the sun shines bright, largemouth bass go looking for the shade. And in many of the small, shallow ponds throughout New England, a bass's favorite spot to cool off is underneath the lily pads. Let's start out by heading to eastern Connecticut, where On the Water contributing writer Bob Sampson Jr. is going to show us a few of his tips for targeting largemouth bass in the lily pads.
Hi, I'm Bob Sampson, a contributing writer for On the Water magazine. Today we got the cameras here on a little southern New England bog-type pond. There's places like this all over New England that you can fish, backyard ponds, farm ponds, cranberry bogs that are full of lilies like you see right here. We're going to be throwing, I call this slopping the pig. This is my crippled sloppy pig junior. He lost a leg earlier there on a small fish. We're going to be fishing weedless style lures, salad spoon, Lunker City salad spoon, sloppy pig junior, and its mother or father, the sloppy pig. These lures are perfect for working in the pads. You can fish them pretty much weedless. Got to use heavy gear. As you can see, I got, this is some 55-pound Saltiga line, Daiwa Saltiga, heavy action spinning rod. You need to wrench the fish out of the pads. It can be a lot of fun, it can be a little frustrating. And took a few casts earlier so far today, and we haven't been doing real well. But there are a few fish jumping, eating little dragonflies in the lily pads here. We're going to see if we can get one for you here on film. One of the things you notice when I'm bringing this lure in, it helps to keep your rod tip high, even though normally I'd like it low for hook set. What I try to do is keep it high to keep the line off the pads, and when a fish hits, you drop it down and wait till you feel them and then set back. Otherwise you end up pulling it away from a lot of fish. I can run the boat. Oh, there was a good fish. Scaring them, not hitting them today for some reason. Come on, boys. Keep going. Pretty large expanse of pads here. Normally they're thicker than this. We had kind of a cool spring with a lot of rain down this way, so the water was deep. I don't think there was enough sun penetrating to get them growing as early as usual, so we don't have as thick a bunch. Oh, that spooked that sucker. There we go. All right, we finally got one. Not a big fish, but we got one. Sorry there, Mr. Bass. Anyhow. This is what we came here for today. This is how many times? Trying to get a bass on a salad spoon. We've been spooking them all day. It's a small bass. I'm going to get him back in the water here in a second. But what we've been doing, we've been fishing the pads. Finally came down into a little thicker area, and Finally got a strike. This one here, it looked like we scared him, but he was actually heading towards the lure instead of away like the other 20 fish we've seen so far today. I'm gonna put him back in the water and see if we can get its great-grandfather 5 times removed. Today's a mid-July, late July day, and we're fishing for largemouth bass in a weedy little southeastern Connecticut pond. And there's places like this all over New England that have lily pads, that have largemouth bass, pickerel, pike in them. And a day like this, looks like a bluebird day, but it really isn't. There's actually semi-low pressure, southwest wind. Sun will drive the bass into the lily pads, and you use lures that can get to them. And the stuff I like to fish, my favorite lure, one of my favorite lures, is a salad spoon made by Lunker City, Herb Reed, guy that makes sluggos. Color doesn't really matter. You know, I kind of like a little darker ones, but the color doesn't matter too much. And what we're going to be doing is throwing a combination of lures that are like this. This second one here, it's called the Sloppy Pig Jr. You can see this is pretty well beat up. The original lure actually had 2 tails, and we found that when the tails get nipped off, you put a notch in them, take some of that hoagie glue and glue a tail on it, a salad spoon tail or a twisted tail, and you can make a functional lure that you can get a few more fish out of. And this is that thing's big mother. This is actually a pike muskie lure that we found works pretty well for bass and pike around here. It's called the Sloppy Pig, and that's called the Sloppy Pig Jr. Made by a guy in Wisconsin, I think it is, Odyssey Lures. And these things are pretty interesting. This thing here, and we'll see when we get it back into the bigger, thicker pads, start increasing the size of the lure to effectively run through. The idea is staying weedless. And this kind of fishing, there's no finesse to it whatsoever. It's basically pounding the lily pads. When you catch a fish, you set the hook and either rip the fish out of the pads, or go to it if it's a big one, go over and fetch it. But the fun is watching them come out of the lilies and blast your lure. If you notice, I have some fairly heavy tackle. This is actually stuff, one of my rods is a musky rod. I use heavier stuff for this than I do for striper fishing most of the time. But you need it. This is some new line I'm playing around with called Saltiga by Daiwa. It's the first stuff I found that rivals Fireline for this kind of fishing with a spinning rod. For any kind of fishing with a spinning rod. It casts pretty well. This is 55-pound test, and it looks like about 20. It's a braid. Normally I don't like braids. Fireline is not a braid. It's a extruded filaments. But this is the first braid I've found that I actually like. It casts pretty well. Casts way better than most braids do. And this is not a, oop, there was a fish. Did you see it? Possibility of a strike right there. Shadow passing overhead sometimes will spook the fish. But that's one of the things you want to keep doing, though, is just keep after. See a fish jump, cast to it. And that fish there, that one we just caught, was a typical, you know, that's the average size fish you get doing this stuff. Little guys are the ones that are out feeding, but you can, I've caught numerous 5, 6, 7 pounders doing this stuff over the years. Get a few big ones every summer. Oh, here's somebody just moved. Ooh, that was a good sized fish. There we go. I think I lost him. Well, he's still there. Maybe that's the key, getting some distance. Another surprisingly small fish for this big lure. That was on the Sloppy Pig Jr. Pretty big lure for a little bass, but they have high hopes, I guess, you know. 10 from the American judge.
welcome back. Now it's my turn to get in on the action. All right, today we're fishing one of the many small shallow ponds on Cape Cod. I'm not going to say exactly what pond it is because it doesn't matter. There's ponds like this all over the place. It doesn't get much more than about 3 or 4 feet deep here tops, so it's real good. It's got a lot of lily pads, and what I really like about these smaller ponds is the fishing pressure is very low. You can only get in here in a kayak or a canoe, and that really keeps the crowds away, and you know, the fish aren't as wary as they are in some of the larger bodies of water. So don't ever think that because it's a small pond you can't hold big fish. I've actually found that it's usually quite the opposite. All right, well, it's about 7:30 in the morning right now. Sun's just starting to peek up on the water, and that's a good thing for us. That's gonna push all the fish in this little pond here underneath the pads, and just gonna start by working some topwater weedless baits, twitching them over the pads, and when these fish hit, it's pretty explosive, and you'll know right away when you get a hit. All right, when you're working these topwater baits on the top of the pads like this, you can really see how they're just sending out vibrations all down through the lily pads, and any fish within 10, 15 feet of that area is going to want to come over and check it out and see what's going on. They can't really actually see the bait as much as they're just seeing the movement on top of the pads. That's why I think lure color and lure choice isn't as critical here. As long as you have a bait that stays up on top, doesn't get snagged in the weeds. These fish aren't getting a very good look at the bait. They're just seeing something big moving around up there. And it's always important to work these baits right up to the boat. A lot of times you'll get a bass following it, and they'll come right up to the boat and just explode on it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I whiffed on that one. Oh, there we go. Game on. Oh, that thing just crushed it right on top of the pads. It was way out at the end of my cast. So now the fun begins. We've hooked them, but we got to rip them through this jungle here to get them to the boat. And as you can see, the boat's moving about as fast as the fish is right now. And I don't think this is a particularly huge fish, but like I said, with all these weeds on there, it's pretty tough to tell. Not bad, not the biggest bass in the pond. We got him. A little bit hog-tied in the lily pads. There you have it. Small guy, but still exciting when they come up and crush it in the top of the pads like that. I think things are looking pretty good, and hopefully we'll get some twice this size today. All right, welcome back to On the Water TV. Today we're down at the local pond doing some midsummer bass fishing. Let's take a quick look at some of the tackle we've used on today's show. Let's start with our lure selection today. Right here we got an oldie but a goodie. This is the Scum Frog. It's been around for a number of years now. Proven winner on topwater lily pad fishing for largemouth bass. What I really like about this lure is we got 2 hooks on it, which give us a nice solid hook set. You can see those are pretty heavy duty hooks on there. We also got a small weight right in the bottom of this thing, and what that weight does, aside from giving us some extra casting distance, it really makes the bait sit with its butt facing down into the water, so when a fish comes up and grabs it, the hook points are up and you get a good hook up on it. All right, another lure that we had some luck with today is your good old-fashioned rubber worm. This is a 7-inch Berkeley power worm. These have been around for years. They get some built-in scent, which is nice. Now the key with using a rubber worm is rigging it so it's completely weedless. Here we have a 2-aught Gamakatsu offset worm hook. And the way to thread these is to go in just through the front of the worm, a 1/4 to 1/2 inch or so. We're going to bring that down, snug it up against the eye of the hook. And then the key is to give yourself a little bit of slack. So we're going to push this up slightly, set the hook point back into the bait, and pull it so it's nice and straight from the top to the bottom. Now you want to keep your hook point exposed inside of the rubber worm on this so it doesn't get snagged up in the weeds. That's not going to be a problem when the fish hits. They're going to explode on this thing and the hook's going to pop right through there. So that's a nice standard weedless rigged rubber worm. You'll see this rigging used on all sorts of different baits in the fishing world, and it's great when you're working heavy cover and you need to keep your hook out of the weeds. This little guy right there, he's got it by the tail. Oh, did I get him? Nope. He was just hanging on to it. That's one thing about using the bigger, the scum frog that I was throwing before versus this rubber worm is that it really cuts down on the size of the fish. Now, even those little bass are going to go after something this size, but with this big scum frog, that kind of weeds out the little ones for us. But what's happened is I've covered pretty much all this pond now with the scum frog, so I just wanted to go back to some of the promising areas, where I've seen fish already today, and pitch something a little bit more delicate in there. So that's why I'm throwing the rubber worm right now. There we go. Ah, Mr. Pickerel. Surprised we haven't seen you yet. This pond's loaded with pickerel as well as bass, but generally you don't get as many of them on the top water baits. But this guy got it right when it came off the edge of the lily pads. Come here, buddy. This guy's got attitude. Look at him. He wants a piece of me. Best way to handle the pickerel. Whoop. Looks like a blue fish. Get him right behind the head there. I'm going to stay away from those teeth. They'll cut you up pretty good. Yep, come on, buddy. And these little buggers are slimy. Tough to handle, but cool little fish. Total ambush predator. He's right at home in these lily pads. Now, one thing you can do with these rubber worms is I just got a couple small fish on it. What I'll do is it's getting a little bit ripped up. Just going to bite off the top end of it so I can set the hook. Big Johnson, there he is. Oh, that's a good fish. Oh, nice. Now I gotta get him over these pads. Oh, stay up, stay up, stay up. Oh, don't go in there. Yeah, he went in there. Oh, come on, Ellie. Tell you what, I'm putting this line to the test on this guy. You gotta get him moving though. Yep, I got him through that pad. Feels like he weighs 100 pounds. He's got so much weeds on him. I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. That's a nice bass. Nothing wrong with that. Whew, that was exciting. A bit of a workout. Nice fish. I'd say that guy's got to go 4 easy. Nice bass on the scum frog. Whew, that got my adrenaline going. I'm Andy Nabreski, you're watching On the Water TV. If you'd like to learn even more about fishing in New England, log on to onthewater.com or pick up a copy of On the Water magazine.
On the Water TV is brought to you by Evinrude, makers of the innovative line of E-Tech outboards and the official outboard of On the Water TV.